In the midst of an ancient, dense jungle, the remnants of a fierce battle lay scattered across the battlefield. Broken weapons, shattered shields, and bodies of soldiers, both friend and foe, littered the ground. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and blood, a chilling reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. Sunlight barely filtered through the thick canopy of towering trees, casting long shadows over the bodies that had once fought bravely. Among the carnage there was one body that lay still, almost forgotten, a lone warrior, abandoned by his comrades. His name was Kale. Once a proud and capable soldier, he now lay lifeless on the forest floor, his armor battered and dented from the relentless battle. His breathing was shallow, barely a whisper against the quiet of the jungle. His once sharp eyes were now closed, his strength drained, and his life hanging by a thread. The battle had been brutal, and Kyle had fought with all his might, but the tide of war had turned against him. He had been surrounded, outnumbered, and ultimately left for dead. His comrades had fled, leaving him behind, too injured to move, too weak to defend himself. Kale had expected death, his body broken, his spirit fading. But death, as it turned out, would not be his fate. The jungle around him was eerily silent, the calm after a storm. Birds did not chirp, and no sounds of animals could be heard. It was as if the forest itself had grown still, sensing something that was about to unfold. Suddenly the air shifted. A faint sound echoed through the trees, a rustling of leaves, a whisper on the wind. And then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, yet silent, like shadows moving through the mist. From the depths of the jungle, a group of figures appeared. They moved with an unnatural grace. Their steps, light but confident, their bodies powerful and agile. These were no ordinary beings. Their skins shimmered in the faint light, a deep blue hue that caught the golden rays filtering through the trees. They were tall, statuesque, their bodies covered in intricate armor made of dark metal and golden accents. Each woman carried a spear, sharp and lethal, yet they walked with the poise of royalty. The leader of the group, a tall and imposing woman, stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the fallen warrior. Her eyes were unlike anything Kale had ever seen, bright, glowing orange, like twin embers burning with intensity. Her face was strong, her jaw set in determination, and her long dark hair cascaded down her back in thick flowing braids. She was a vision of strength and power, a warrior unlike any Kale had ever encountered. She knelt beside him, her gaze never leaving his broken form. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, as though she was connected to the very fabric of the jungle itself. The others gathered around, standing at attention, their eyes watching the leader's every move. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for her command. For a long moment, the woman examined Kale. Her fingers, brushing lightly over the torn fabric of his armor, she could feel the faintest pulse of life still within him, a spark of strength hidden beneath his battered exterior. This was no ordinary man. She sensed something in him, something that spoke to her in a way she could not explain. She looked, to the others, her decision clear. "Bring him with us," she commanded, her voice low but filled with authority. Kyle's lifeless body was gently lifted and carried by two of the warriors. The woman who had knelt beside him remained silent, her gaze lingering on the fallen man as they moved him. She knew that this decision, this act of mercy, was not one to be taken lightly. They had never chosen to save a human before. In fact, they had never shown mercy to any being who had crossed their path. But something about this man had struck a chord within her, something she could not explain. As the group moved deeper into the jungle, Kyle's body was carried toward the hidden camp of the warrior women. It was a place known only to a select few, a sanctuary that was shielded from the world beyond. The warriors had fought countless battles, their tribe surviving for generations in the heart of the jungle. Their enemies were many, and their strength was unmatched. But there was something about this man, this fallen warrior, that intrigued them. Kyle, unaware of the journey unfolding around him, remained unconscious, his body limp, The faint whisper of his breath was the only sign that he still lived. His mind, lost in darkness, drifted between dreams and reality. He had no idea who these women were, or why they had saved him. All he could feel was an overwhelming sense of uncertainty, a sense that his life was no longer his own. Was he being taken to a place of healing, or to a place where his life would end? Was this a cruel twist of fate, or was there something greater at play? As the warriors carried him through the jungle, Kyle's fate was about to take a turn, one that would change everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him. Hook. Why did these powerful women choose to save a man left for dead? What makes him different from the others? What hidden strength does he have that will shape the destiny of these warriors? The tension was building, and the real journey was just about to begin. As the warrior women carried Kyle deeper into the jungle, the dense foliage seemed to part in front of them, creating a path leading to a hidden enclave. The air grew cooler as they approached the camp, the sounds of nature growing louder and more alive, yet still somehow distant. The camp was nestled within the heart of the jungle, a sanctuary crafted from the land itself. There were no signs of human habitation, just large, towering trees, woven structures made of wood and vines, and the soft murmurs of the wind rustling through the leaves. Kale's body was carefully placed on a soft bed made of leaves and animal pelts in the center of a large wooden hut. The women moved around him with purpose, their eyes sharp and vigilant as they prepared for the next steps. The leader, the woman who had chosen to save him, knelt beside his body once more. She studied his unconscious form with a mixture of curiosity and concern. There was something about him, something about the way his body seemed to still hold on to life despite the odds, that intrigued her. She placed a hand over his chest, her fingers glowing faintly with a soft, golden light. The warmth from her touch seemed to seep into his body, the heat of her energy mixing with his own. It wasn't magic, not exactly. It was an ancient energy that the warrior women had been taught to harness. An energy that could heal, restore, and renew. But even with her power, the leader knew that Kale's survival was not guaranteed. She was attempting something she had never done before, giving life back to someone who had already been abandoned by fate. The other women began gathering around, watching quietly. They had never seen the leader act with such care for a human. She was not the type to show mercy. The jungle had taught them to be strong, to survive, and to protect their own. But this human, this fallen warrior, was different. His body had been left to die, discarded as if his life had no value. Yet the leader saw something in him, something that pulled at her in a way she couldn't explain. Is he going to make it? One of the women asked, her voice low. The leader did not answer immediately. Instead, she focused all her energy on Kyle, her brow furrowed in concentration. The jungle seemed to hold its breath as she worked, the rhythmic sound of the wind in the trees mingling with the leader's soft whispers. There was a tension in the air, a sense of waiting, as if the outcome of this rescue could change everything. For several minutes, nothing happened. The leader's hand remained over Kale's chest, her energy pouring into him. But still, there was no sign of life. The women stood in silence, their eyes never leaving their leader. It was as if they too were holding their breath, unsure of what would come next. And then, a faint pulse. A slight rise in Kyle's chest. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The leader's eyes widened slightly, her heart quickening in response. She felt it too, the pulse of life returning to him, a sign that he was not beyond saving after all. Kale's eyelids fluttered, and for the first time since he had been found, he stirred. A sharp gasp escaped his lips as he suddenly became aware of his surroundings. The first thing he noticed was the scent of unfamiliar herbs and the soft rustling of leaves. His body ached with an intensity he couldn't describe. His vision was blurry, and his head felt like it was filled with a heavy fog. He tried to move, but his limbs were weak, as if they no longer belonged to him. "Easy," a soft voice said, and Kale turned his head toward it. It was the leader, the woman who had saved him. Her orange eyes were fixed on him, glowing softly in the dim light of the camp. Her expression was calm, but there was an intensity in her gaze that made Kale feel both vulnerable and safe at the same time. "What happened?" Kale croaked, his voice hoarse and unsteady. "You were left for dead," she replied, her tone firm yet not unkind. "But we chose to save you." Kale tried to process her words, but his mind was clouded. He could remember the battle, the chaos, the overwhelming feeling of helplessness as he was abandoned. He could remember the faces of his comrades as they fled, leaving him behind. But why would these women save him? What did they want from him? "I don't understand," Kale murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to understand," the leader said, her gaze softening. "What matters is that you are alive." Kale's eyes flickered to the other women standing nearby, their eyes watching him with curiosity. He tried to sit up, but his body was too weak, and he fell back against the bed of leaves with a groan. The women moved closer. Their presence, strong and reassuring. They were unlike any warriors he had ever seen, fierce, graceful, and determined. Their armor gleamed in the dim light, and their weapons were as sharp as their minds. "Why did you save me?" Kale asked, his voice full of doubt and confusion. "I'm not worth saving." The leader's expression hardened slightly. "You are worth saving because we see potential in you," she said. "You were left for dead, but you are not weak. We know strength when we see it. And there is something within you that makes you different from the others." Kale could feel her words resonate deep within him, though he wasn't sure he fully understood what she meant. What could a group of warrior women possibly see in a man like him? He had failed and he had been left to die. He was nothing more than a broken soldier. "You will learn to fight again," the leader continued, her voice unwavering. "But first you must heal. The jungle will teach you what you need to know." For the first time in what felt like forever, Kyle felt a flicker of hope. These women, these warriors who had saved him, saw something in him that no one else had. Maybe, just maybe, he could rise again. Suspense. What kind of strength did they see in him? And would he be able to live up to their expectations? Or would he falter and fail them too? As Kyle lay there, surrounded by the fierce warrior women, he knew one thing for sure. His life had been given a second chance, and he had no idea what the future held. But he would learn, and he would fight. He had to. For these women who had saved him, for the strength within him that he was only beginning to understand. The turning point had arrived, and Kale's journey was just beginning. As days passed in the hidden sanctuary deep within the jungle, Kale's body began to heal, but his mind remained clouded with confusion and doubt. The warrior women had done more than save his life. They had given him a second chance, but he had yet to understand why. He was training now, learning their ways, but each lesson only deepened his uncertainty. How could a man like him, someone, abandoned in the heat of battle, be worthy of such a chance? The women who had rescued him were fierce and powerful, their skills unmatched in combat. They were warriors born and bred, and Kale struggled to match their strength. They saw potential in him, but he couldn't see it in himself. His body, though healing, still ached with the weight of failure. His muscles trembled as he struggled to keep up with their rigorous training. The leader, the woman who had saved him, pushed him harder than anyone else. She was relentless in her training, demanding nothing less than the best from him. Her presence was both a source of strength and frustration for Kale. He admired her, yet felt a sense of unworthiness every time she looked at him with those burning, glowing eyes, as if she could see something inside him that he couldn't even comprehend. "Focus, Kyle," she would say, her voice sharp and commanding. "You must learn to control your fear. A warrior cannot be led by fear." But Kyle felt fear in every movement, the fear of failure, the fear of letting them down, and the fear of never being enough to repay the debt he felt he owed for his life. One morning after a grueling training session, Kale found himself sitting on a large rock, breathing heavily, his body covered in sweat. The warrior women had gone back to their duties and he was alone with his thoughts. He gazed at the distant horizon, watching the sun rise over the treetops. There was something about the calm of the jungle that made him feel small, insignificant, even in his moments of solitude. But his thoughts were interrupted by the soft crunch of footsteps behind him. He turned to see the leader approaching, her face as unreadable as ever. She stopped in front of him, her piercing eyes locking with his. "You're not going to give up, are you?" she asked, her tone direct. Kyle looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "I was abandoned, left to die. I don't have the strength to be what you want me to be." The leader's expression softened just for a moment. She knelt beside him, her eyes never leaving his face. "I did not bring you here to make you something you are not," she said quietly. "I brought you here because I see what you do not. Your survival is not a mistake. You are not weak, Kyle. But you are afraid." "Afraid of what?" Kyle asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Afraid of your own power," she replied. "Afraid of what you could become if you let go of your doubts. You've survived the battle because something inside you fought. Something inside you refused to die. That is why I chose you." Her words struck him harder than any blow. Could it be true? Could he really be more than the broken warrior he thought he was? He had always seen himself as someone discarded, weak, unwanted. But this woman, this powerful leader, saw something in him that he hadn't seen in himself. She believed in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself. Still, Kyle hesitated. The training was hard. The jungle was unforgiving. And the thought of facing the upcoming battle, the one that he knew was looming on the horizon, filled him with dread. His body may have healed, but his mind was far from ready to face whatever challenge awaited. "Then prove it," the leader said, her voice firm but gentle. "Prove to yourself that you are more than the man they left behind. Prove to yourself that you are worthy of the second chance you've been given." Her words were a challenge that Kale couldn't ignore. He had always been a warrior, always fought for survival, but he had never fought for himself, not like this. This was different. This was about more than just the battle. It was about discovering who he truly was, beneath all the layers of doubt and fear. The days that followed were filled with more intense training. Kale pushed himself harder than ever before, learning the ways of the warrior women, mastering skills he never thought he could possess. But the true test came when he faced the leader in a one-on-one sparring match. His heart raced as he stood across from her, his body tense with fear. He had seen her fight. She was unstoppable. And now he had to face her. The sparring match began, and Kale immediately found himself on the defensive. The leader's movements were swift and precise, each strike landing with the force of a storm. But this time, Kale did not retreat. He didn't shy away from her attacks. Instead, he fought back with everything he had, his body moving with an instinct he didn't know he possessed. The fear that had once held him back was gone, replaced by something new, something powerful. For the first time in what felt like forever, Kyle felt alive. The energy within him surged, his muscles moving in perfect harmony with his mind. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something more. He was fighting for himself. The match ended in a draw, but the look in the leader's eyes told Kale everything he needed to know. She didn't see him as the broken soldier anymore. She saw him as a warrior. "Well done," she said, her voice tinged with approval. Kale looked at her, his chest heaving, his mind racing. "I'm not the man I was before," he said, his voice steady. "But I will fight. I will fight for you, for this tribe, for myself." Suspense. But as Kale embraces his new identity, the looming battle is fast approaching. Will he truly be able to face the enemy, or will his newfound strength crumble in the face of danger? The jungle was alive with the sounds of preparation. The warrior women had gathered in their hidden camp, their eyes sharp and their movements fluid as they readied themselves for the coming storm. Kyle stood among them, his body now a reflection of the strength he had gained over the past days. His muscles were defined, his movements more precise, and his mind sharper than it had ever been before. But even with all the training and newfound power, doubt still lingered within him. He stood at the edge of the camp, looking out into the dense trees, his heart racing. The enemy was closing in. A massive army, more than double the size of their own, had been tracking them for weeks. It was a force that could easily crush them all, and Cale knew that they were fighting for survival, not just for honor. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on his chest. The leader of the warrior women, the woman who had brought him back from the brink of death, approached him. Her eyes were as determined as ever, but this time there was a softness to her gaze, a trust she had placed in him. She had not only trained him to fight, but she had also given him something much more valuable: belief in himself. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with an unspoken understanding. Kyle nodded, though the fear inside him threatened to swallow him whole. "I've never been more ready," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. It was not fear of death, but fear of failing them all. The leader placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip strong. "Then prove it, Cale. You are not the man who was left behind. You are the man who will fight for those who believed in you. Now go. Fight for us." The words stung, but in the best way possible. Cale straightened, feeling the weight of his new identity. He had no more excuses. It was time to stand tall. As the battle began, the jungle erupted into chaos. The clash of steel, the cries of warriors, and the roar of enemy war cries filled the air. Kyle stood among the women, his heart pounding, his eyes scanning the battlefield. He had learned their ways. He had trained for this moment, and now he had to prove that the trust they had placed in him was not misplaced. The enemy charged, their warriors rushing toward them with reckless abandon. Cale was at the front, his sword raised, his heart beating like a drum in his chest. The first wave of enemy soldiers collided with them, and Cale fought with everything he had. His body moved with the grace and precision he had learned from the warrior women, his strikes landing with force and accuracy. But the battle was far from easy. The enemy was relentless, and the warriors began to feel the strain of the fight. Cale fought on, but his strength began to wane. Just as he was about to falter, he heard the voice of the leader cutting through the noise of the battlefield. "Cale!" she shouted, her voice piercing through the chaos. "You have more inside you. You are not alone in this fight. We fight as one." Her words hit him like a lightning bolt. He wasn't alone. The warrior women were with him, and they believed in him. It wasn't just his fight, it was their fight together. Kyle's heart surged with renewed energy. He found a new rhythm in his movements, his strikes becoming faster and more powerful. He fought through the ranks of the enemy, each swing of his sword carrying the weight of his redemption. His body no longer felt weak. Instead, it felt powerful, capable of overcoming anything. As the battle raged on, Kyle found himself face to face with the leader of the enemy army. The man was a towering figure, clad in dark, spiked armor, his eyes filled with malice. He was ruthless and cold, a perfect embodiment of the enemy they had been fighting against. "You're not even worth my time," the enemy leader sneered, his voice full of arrogance. "You're just another discarded soldier, doomed to fail." Cale's grip tightened on his sword. "You don't know who I am," he said, his voice steady with conviction. The two clashed in a fierce duel. The enemy leader's strikes were heavy and brutal, but Cale was faster, more agile. The power he had gained from the warrior women coursed through him as he dodged and countered, his sword flashing in the air. Each strike felt like a message, not just to the enemy leader, but to himself. He was no longer the man left for dead. He was a warrior, strong and true. With one final, powerful blow, Cale struck down the enemy leader. The battle came to a sudden halt, the remaining enemy forces retreating in fear of the leader's defeat. Cale stood over the fallen foe, his chest heaving, his mind racing. He had done it. He had faced his fear and he had conquered it. Not only had he survived, but he had become the man the warrior women believed him to be. As the enemy fled, The warrior women gathered around Kale. They were battered but victorious. Their eyes were filled with pride as they looked at him. The leader stepped forward, her gaze softening. She placed a hand on his shoulder once more. "You have proven yourself, Kale," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You are no longer the man left for dead. You are one of us now." Kale looked around at the women who had saved him, who had trained him, who had given him a second chance. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged. He had found his place among these warriors, and together they had won. Resolution. As the sun began to set over the jungle, Kyle stood with the warrior women, his heart full of pride and gratitude. He had faced his darkest fears, and through the strength of the women who had believed in him, he had emerged victorious. He was no longer a man left for dead. He was a warrior, reborn. The jungle, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt like home. And Kale knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, with the strength of his new family by his side.